Now let's concentrate on phase 3, design phase. So in this phase, basically this design architecture will participate as discussed earlier, and few documents like database document, graphical user interface document, as well as application design document like high level document and low level document, HLD and LLD documents which are related to the developers will be planned in this phase, design phase. And the programming languages or scripting languages, database technologies, so all this will be planned in this phase. So in this phase, basically the main important thing to be discussed is application design documents and as well as database design documents. Now, as discussed in our previous session, like application design documents are completely related to the developers. These are known as developers documents. So we are not going to concentrate much on this. Now let's move on to the coding part, coding or implementation. By using the requirements of the client, by taking help of high level and low level documentation, this coding happens in a coding phase. These developers do write some code depending on the application. I mean to say, if it is for Windows based application, they can go for programming languages like C, C++, Java or .NET. If it is some scripting languages, generally they will go for scripting languages like Perl scripting, Java scripting or PHP or something like that. So here the actual coding happens. So once after the coding is done, very interesting and important task. Once after the coding is done, so what's the next phase? So everyone here will say that it's a testing phase, and that is what our phase is. Okay, I agree with that. That's our phase, and that is what the testing phase, what we are looking for. But who will participate in this phase? Who are going to participate in this phase? Only the tester or anyone else? Just think once. Only the tester or anyone else? If your answer is only the tester, then it's wrong. Yes, even developer will also participate in testing. Looking strange, right? But yes, let me explain you the thing clearly. So after writing hundreds of lines of a code, after writing some lines of a code, developer should recheck his code. Do you agree with me? Obviously, yes. Developer should recheck his code. So can't I call it as a testing? Obviously, it's a testing. Undoubtedly, it's a testing. So after writing, like let's assume that let me take a unit. So this developer has written a code into this unit according to the low level document. After writing a lines of a code, you need to check all his code. So that is also a testing, and we'll call this as a, it has a name actually, we'll call this as a white box testing. White box testing. So the first testing which is carried on the application is white box testing, that is performed by developer, on code, on the source code what he has written. So even in the white box testing, again we'll be having like unit testing and integration testing. Unit testing and integration testing are the part of white box testing, so we'll be discussing them as we move into the subject. But as if now, so once after the coding is done, the next task is testing by the developer. So what he is going to test? He is going to test the code. I'm repeating is he's going to test the code what he has written. So this process is known as white box testing. So I'm repeating it once again. White box testing is done by the developer on source code. So this we have a unit 10 integration testing. So here once unit 10 integration testing are done, so that is nothing but white box testing is done, then it will be released to a separate testing team, and our separate testing teams guys will participate on system testing, means the whole system we are going to test it. So this process we'll call it as a black box testing. So why we call it as a black box testing? Because to perform the black box testing, there is no need to have any programming language knowledge, or else will be no access, or else will be not even looking at the source code. So without having what happens internally in the source code, without having a knowledge, without taking information what happens internally in a source code, testing the application is called black box testing. This is performed by the special software testers like us. So we are black box testers, as simple as that. So once after the white box testing is done, one unit testing and integration testing is done, it will form like a whole system. On that whole system, we are going to perform the testing activities like end user, like a user. The point, I'm repeating it. So as a black box tester, you are going to work on an end application like a user, like a user. So this process is known as black box testing. Next, we have, once black box testing is done, a tester said that everything is fine from the user perspective, or everything is fine according to the requirements. Now that should be released to the client. Now client will also perform some user acceptance testing. This user acceptance testing has two things. One is alpha testing, another one is a beta testing. Alpha testing and beta testing. Alpha testing is completely in controlled environment. In controlled environment, when clients come to a location and he is going to try to test the application, this process will call it as a alpha testing. Beta testing in the sense a partial release, or else we are going to release that to the client so that client's team will work on that. It's an uncontrolled environment. I guess you have seen a lot of beta versions. Like before releasing the actual application, the companies do release beta versions first, so that people do work on that and they will give the feedback on that. The same thing, that is what the beta version is actually. Uncontrolled environment, they directly release it. In our case also, we are going to directly release it to the client, maybe with the minimum options, or else the full access will be giving it, but it happens in an uncontrolled environment at the client location. That will call it as a beta testing. Okay, yes. So user acceptance testing is done. So once white box is done, black box is done, user acceptance is done. If everything is fine, then we are going to release to the client. So this will call it as a live application. Once after the system testing is done, once user acceptance testing is done, we are going to deliver it to the client. So this will call it as a live or go live. So whatever the changes, once after it is live, whatever the changes, so all the changes will comes under maintenance. As simple as that. Once project is released to the client, whatever the changes you want to make in it, so further changes definitely falls under maintenance. So if application is no longer in use, then the SDLC will end, else the process keeps on repeating. This is what your software development life cycle is. So we have environments here, software development life cycle environments. The first we'll call as a application development, application under development, application development phase. So here, even we'll call it this as a producer environment. Basically, development team will work here. Development team will work, and project managers will work, and software analyst will work in this phase. Once after it has done with it, it has moved into this application under test. So this is a development and it is a testing environment. In this testing environment, test managers, test lead, test engineer, test analyst will work. Once after done with it, it will move on to the client. So then we'll call it as an application under use. So that we'll call it as a production environment. So literally saying from the producer environment, it moves on to the testers environment, test environment, then it will move on to the production environment where the actual application lives. So that's when we call it as a live environment where the client and customer will work on that application. These are the environment, and just as a simple go, I'm going to show you the case study, actually what we have learned till now. A case study, that's it. So we have a requirements. So gathering the requirements as much as possible, and about the specifications and details of different software from the client. Next, the designing phase happens, like planning and designing of the code, database, and all those things. Then of the actual coding, then testing. This is a case study of your software development life cycle. Now, the very interesting and the important point what we need to understand is, these are what software development life cycle phases, life cycle phases. So whatever the application it may be, we need to use all these phases. We need to use all these phases. Now, before going ahead with the next topic, I'm going to give you an example here. Let's assume that we are building up Or else let's assume in a simpler way like this. Some construction is going on. So there is an independent house, single store building, and there is a multi-store apartments around a 20-story building. Okay. Yes. So both should follow the civil rules. Yes. Both should follow the civil rules or construction rules or whatever it may be. But the planning, procedure, way of design, execution is completely different when compared to a single story building and an apartment or a 20-story building. Yes, even they follow the same rules, same like that. Even we follow the software development life cycle phases, but using of that phases may be different depending on the application complexity, depending on the application size, depending on the previous example of application behavior. So this all factor comes into picture, and we are going to do select the best model, software development life cycle model. That is the next part. So what does that software development life cycle model? It contains same phases. I'm repeating it. It contains only these phases, but using of the phases may be different. As simple as that. So in waterfall model, or let's keep that aside for a while. Let's assume that requirement collection. What is requirement collection? You know it. What is analysis? We know it. What is designing? You know it. Now, so in some phases, this requirement collection may happen 3 times. In some cases, requirement analysis may happen 4 times. So every module has its way. If you take X module, there the requirement analysis may happen 4 times. The requirement analysis remains the same, but it happens 4 times. Got the point? So using of the phases may be different. So that's nothing but SDLC model. Depending on the application complexity, depending on the application size, we'll be choosing the best development life cycle. It's a development life cycle. I'm repeating it. In that, testing is a part. Whatever the life cycle it may be, simple. As a tester, your role will never change. You are going to test an application to check whether it is working according to the client requirements or not. So this, it's a completely development life cycle what we are trying to discuss. So as we move into the subject, we'll be focusing on only testing. Then it comes much more easier to you.